Welcome everyone. Last week I told you that I created my personal way to stop the music and remove the background automatically, but apparently like it broke. I had to fix it. So this time you get a bit of silence between the moment I I removed the music and when I removed the logo. So welcome everyone to this week in Svelte. I'm Paolo. I will be your host for today, and joining me today there is Stanislav,
Hello.
which will help me host, and also I will present a very cool demo that we will see later during the community showcase. Because the agenda for today is the usual one, so we will have the changelog. We will go over the changelog. We will have a very small announcement, which you probably are already used to it, but it never. It's always good to rehearse, especially because it's for tomorrow, and we will go over the community showcase from Stanislav, and then we will probably have a nice discussion, I think. So in the meantime, I remind you that if you have any web development related question, Svelte related question especially, drop them in chat because we can have a Q&A for you. So let's start with the changelog. So we left 7 days ago with 109th release. So we are getting we are well over 100 release. Very cool.
It's a lot of releases.
Yep. And we are getting close. We are getting close. So let's see if there's something interesting to talk about. I mean, there are some stuff like robust moving of each item node. CSS is generate for the final frame of a transition, some fixes. But there is also a breaking change, which I also find kind of funny because basically now if you try to put a children to Svelte options, it will error out, which is like it's kind of funny to me because why would you put a children to Svelte options?
I've never heard of this before.
Yes, Svelte options is the way that you can add some options to your Svelte component, one of which is runes. So if you do runes, even if you are not using any rune, your template will be in rune mode like this. And we are getting some countries updated, but it's not declared with state, and it's fine. But the thing that I'm asking is, why would you do these? Like, why would you do Svelte options and add a child here? Child, I don't know. But apparently, this also works for, and that's the reason why it's a breaking change, because this also throws when you try to add a children to Svelte window. Like these, yeah, it's also not working, or body, yeah, it's also not working, which I would guess is like better because maybe you think that you can add new stuff into the body like this or new stuff into the window like this. I don't know, it's fine. More errors is always a good thing in my opinion. And this is something like it's a small fix. I'm actually mentioning just because I did this PR, so it was a small fix by me. Make sure event attributes run after bindings. Nothing exciting. This is something that is super exciting, and I will actually add it to the split window because now you can do these basically. Like before, you had to do this, like post global p post global ul post global, and now you can do this. You can do .post .global, and then you add you use nesting basically, and all of these will be global. The global selector basically is something that you need if you want to because as you may know, Svelte will remove any unused CSS. And if you have an HTML, or maybe if you have a child in another component, you will need global. And it was honestly kind of a pain that you had to write all of this by hand. And now you can just do this, which is I think
this is super clean. It's gonna
yeah,
help a
it's
lot
super clean.
of my components. Like when
I
you
think
load the data from a CMS or something,
yeah,
you
exactly.
often need this, and this is gonna be super useful.
I think when like with Vite preprocess, it's not there because I think with Svelte preprocess, which was the other preprocessor that allowed us to use TypeScript and stuff like that, you could do style global and the whole style tag was global. But I think this is even better because now you have more granularity. So very interesting.
This is great because you're still scoping it to the components. So like what some people maybe misunderstand is that if global is not the first selector, but it comes after another selector, it's actually still going to be scoped to the component, which is super powerful.
Yeah, because basically like this post will get the hash added to it, and this means that everything inside the post, but not every post, just the post that it's inside this component. So very cool. Let's move to this is also something interesting if you are planning to use like to write some like preprocessor for Svelte and stuff like that, because now script and Svelte options are actually included inside the abstract tree, which is cool because you have more things inside the AST and it's like you can work on those. Very interesting. You can also have a bind focused read only. So you can check if an item, an element is focused by binding to the focus property, which is cool. Avoid hosting. I mean, this is just internal stuff. This is also interesting. This is another breaking change. This allow binding to component exports in rune mode. So this is basically if you before you might know that you could do something like this. You could do export const foo in a component and then do a bind equal by colon foo in the parent, and you will basically get this variable in the parent. Which, to be fair, it was kind of confusing because like you can still use these. You can bind these to the instance of the component and then do instance.foo, and you will still get the cost value. But by doing these, like you can never know if you actually want to update that variable. So it was a bit messier, and now it's an error. So it's interesting. There's also these types to express bindability. So now I think like if you know basically there is a bindable room that you need to use if you want to bind something, and now I think these are typings for that, so you can actually say that X is not bindable to number. So yeah, it's an extra layer of type safety for bindability basically. Yeah, these are the last release is not super like our internal stuff, and as you may know, like as accessors and immutable are property of the Svelte compiler, and so this means that before, when you created a component, you can also have accessors to the props, so you could do component dot prop and access it, like either get it or set it. And now you have to do it in a different way if you want to do it imperatively. You just need to create a state, a $ state outside, pass that as a prop, and then update the state. So it's a bit cleaner. And that's it for Svelte. Let's talk about SvelteKit that actually had a release, which was basically a chore. Update the value to v5, and the value is the library that it's using under the hood to communicate between the server and the client. If you ever took a look at the network while you are using a SvelteKit application, you will see a dash dash underscore underscore data.json that is fetching, and it's a bit strange. It's not really JSON. It's JSON, but it's not the usual JSON that you would expect, and that's because it's using the value under the hood that basically like allow you to transfer complex type, like data or promises or stuff like that. So pretty interesting. Let's see if we have anything else. Language tools, like this is probably some new changes in the extension and in the language server to probably allow for editor support for TypeScript 5.4. Handle await inside snippet. Oh, this is also pretty cool. Like before, probably the language server was throwing an error for this. So yeah, update type for doors and prop rooms.
It's going to be cool to see what people do with the snippets and what people are already doing with snippets. Maybe we'll have a separate episode about that.
Yeah, snippets is definitely one of the big favorite of the Svelte 5 release. Like it's one of my favorite features for Svelte 5. They are pretty powerful. And I think I actually like, even just outside of the fact that you can use them to pass like as the old slot, it's super powerful in my opinion. Okay, the changelog is done. Let's move to announcement, because like the announcement, it's the usual announcement. I'm sorry, like it will be the last time for a while, but yeah, tomorrow make sure to connect to this very YouTube channel, because tomorrow is the Svelte Summit day. Tomorrow,
exciting,
April 27. Stay up to date. Yeah, we have a new main partner actually, Convex. So which is cool, sponsored. He also sponsored Monogram. And tomorrow, Kevin and Brittany will actually speak here, and we will have a bunch of talk. So what you can do for your framework by none other than our Lord and Savior, Rich. Layer chart, very interesting. Building a SAS module for SvelteKit by Joshua. Spatial program. This is something very hyped currently. Like if you are into Svelte, make sure to connect tomorrow, because Grisha, which is actually I think it's literally the main guy. Like obviously there is a bunch of people in the core of Svelte, but I think Grisha is actually the creator of Svelte. Simple and sustainable web development in academic libraries with Svelte. Kitbook, which is also cool because it's kind of a storybook written and for SvelteKit.
That's really cool.
There's also this guy here. If you like testing,
look forward to this talk.
Yeah,
I think we get a lot of questions about testing on the Discord. So it's
yes,
fun to hear you talk about
I try to make a very like overview over what and how you can test your application in SvelteKit. So feel free to connect tomorrow, and most importantly, if you actually want to interact during the live stream, feel free to join Discord, which is svelte.dev/chat. We will open threads for every talk, so you can literally talk live with us and see what everybody thinks about tomorrow. I'm very excited for tomorrow. But I am also very excited about what's coming up now, because I will actually remove my screen, because now it's all up to Stanislav. Can I add your screen?
Yes.
Because this will be our community showcase for today, and it's all about how to use a service worker in SvelteKit, which is a super cool technology. So feel free to drop any question, and after that we will do a quick Q&A. See you later, please.
Thank you, Paolo. So this is going to be a very informal presentation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about service workers in SvelteKit. First, I want to just give a very brief overview of what the service workers are. So service workers is a type of script that you can register on any website that you visit or you build. So any SvelteKit site, for example. And it's kind of like this background process that runs in the background, and it can do certain useful things that we're going to see. For example, it can enable offline functionality. So this is the process when you visit the site for the first time. All the major web browsers will install the service worker for you. They will activate it. and they will also like identify if it needs to be updated, and it will be updated. And one of the biggest things that the service worker can do is that it can act kind of like as a middleware between the actual server, your actual server, and the visitor. And what you can do in a service worker is, for example, like in this example, you can cache the site so that even if the user goes offline, your site is still available. And that is really cool. And that's what I want to like test a little bit today with you to see how it works. So many people, they think that maybe you need something special, like a library, like something like Workbox is popular. But actually, Svelte, it doesn't have a service worker built in, but the Svelte kit, I should say, but the docs have an example service worker that is actually configured really well out of the box. So I thought we would try it. I have this site here that I'm going to go to. So this is a site. You can see that it shows you the kind of last time it could connect to the server. It updates every minute. It's using a load function. So if we go to the inspect tab and we go here, you're going to see here that it reloads the data every second. And I have some other routes that work similarly, but we're going to go ahead and install the service worker first. So in order to do that, I'm just going to go follow along with the documentation. I've switched to TypeScript here. I'm going to take this service worker, this whole thing, and I'm going to add it to my project. So this is the project that I was showing earlier, and you add it in the source folder, call it serviceworker.ts, paste it in. Now there is some type stuff that you need to do if you're using TypeScript. So I'm going to go down here and add this little extra note here, which is about types. And it's all documented, but you need to change just a few lines of code. Here we go. There. And now that I saved it, we can see if our service worker is actually being loaded. And to do that, in the Inspect tab of your browser, you go to the Application tab, and then you go to this Service Workers tab. And what we can see here is that we have our service worker running. So I'm going to unregister it to make it like start over. There we go. So now the service worker is running. So the code we added is running. But what is the code doing? Okay, so that's the interesting part. I thought we could kind of like look through what the code is doing, and so we can understand what is going on. So there's 3 methods. So there's install, activate, and fetch. And there's some code up here. So let's look first at install. So the first thing it's doing is it's creating a new cache of files. And this is the part of the service worker that's going to be able to cache our application in the background so it can work offline. And by default, SvelteKit, the implementation, will add all the build files, so like all the JavaScript and resources and everything that makes up your applications, as well as the files in the static folder. So it's going to go ahead. So when you load the app, it's going to actually like cache all those files. And you can kind of see that if you go to the network tab. So when you load the page, it's going to actually like load all of the different files, even the ones that that are not loaded for the route you're currently on. And that is to make your entire application available offline. It's a little bit hard to see here because the dev server works a little bit differently, but we can still demo some of the cool things you can do. So that's basically what install does. It adds all these files into the cache. Then we have the activate step, which all it does is delete the old cache. And that is because we we use this variable called version, and this changes every time you rebuild WordPress. It's some sort of rebuild SvelteKit. It's some sort of like timestamp. So this is going to just do a little bit of cleanup behind the scenes. And then we get into fetch, which is the most interesting one. This acts as a proxy on top of all of the requests that is going to go to your site. And what this actually does is, well, first of all, it checks like if it's not a GET request, so you're posting some sort of form or something, it's just going to bail out. It's not even going to touch that because we don't typically want to cache post requests, so like when you're submitting a form or something. And then it implements this respond method. And what it basically does is it takes the URL that the user is visiting, and then it tries to check if that URL is available in the cache. So if it is, it's going to return it. And like, what does that actually look like? Well, let's try it out. So let's go into the service worker, and let's toggle the offline state here. All right, let's see here. And as you see here, even though I am now offline, so this browser is offline, if I reload the page, it still works. But how can it work? Well, it works because of the service worker. If I didn't have the service worker, I would just see this like you are offline page. But as you can see, also like what happened is that we're not getting any new times here on the in the text here, because we are no longer actually getting the new time, because we are offline, and we're getting the old data back from the service worker. So you can see here, if we check, it's the same date every time, because that is the last date that the service worker saved for us. So very cool. So already, like, we're doing a lot of cool stuff. This means that even if your server is offline or the user can't access the internet, your application will still work. But let's keep going. What else is going on here? So here's how it works. So we're going to try the network first. So we're making a fetch. We're trying to get the file. And if I'm offline, that's not going to work. So then we get the error here. So if we succeed, we're going to put the file into the cache. But if we don't, it's going to be an error, and we're going to get into this section. So first we tried the online file. We went like online first to check if we can fetch it. And if we can't, then we're going to try to see if it was already in the cache. And if it's not, it's going to actually just error out. So as an example, if I just go to some page here, like /hello, see, this is actually going to give me that error in Chrome, that it wasn't able to actually find anything. But actually, with service workers, it's so cool because we can actually even fix this. We can have like a fallback. So instead of returning this, or throwing this error, which will give you the browser like default error page, we can actually return like some sort of basic response, because this is like, if you recall, this is like an error state. So what we can do instead is we can return a response, because remember, this is all request response. This is standard like fetch stuff. So I'm returning just a page that says something went very wrong, try force closing and reloading. So if I load this and I go back online with my site, so that it loads the new service worker. And if I then go back on offline and I try to load some URL that definitely doesn't exist, you see we got the default error that we set up in the service worker. So very cool. So this enables us to do all kinds of cool stuff, like, if you're offline, you can show the old data, or you can show the user like an error message, something like that. Okay, so that is one cool thing we can do. And I also want to show like how by default everything will be cached, right? That's what we saw with this time, that when you press offline, the time is not updating, and that's like the default behavior. But what if we actually want things to error out so that we see that the user is offline? Well, first you might have noticed this little text, and this is something that I implemented. I just want to show you that you can do very easily, which is like detecting if you're offline or not. And the way this works is through this event listener on window called online and offline. So you can just add this. So you see in on mount, I'm just hooking up this event listener on the page. And this callback will actually be called when the online state changes. So you can know if you're online and offline. And then I just set this variable called offline false by default, but then I set it to true, and I show this error message that I'm offline. So that's really cool too. That's very easy to detect the online state. And then, like as I mentioned, like maybe you want to take away so that not everything is cached by default. How do you do that? Well, it's actually very easy. we can do basically almost the same thing as we have here. So here we are checking if it's not a GET request, and then we bail out. And we can do something very similar. For example, let's say that we're going to move this up here, and let's say that we want to remove we have a /API path, and we want to remove that from being cached because we always want that data to be fresh. So what we can do is do something like this: URL dot path name starts with so exactly like this. So now everything under /API will actually not be cached by the service worker. And I want to show you how that works differently then. So if we go back, we reload, make sure the new service worker is up and running. And we go to the, let's see here. Let's see. I feel like I did something wrong. Oh yeah, I'm still offline. That's why it's not working. Well, it really helps to not forget about that. All right, so now I got the new service worker running, including the whitelisting of the API route. So if I go to /API now, you see the page looks exactly the same, but the difference is that we're now fetching from this /API route. So we can see here that it's fetching the date instead of through the loader. Through the load, it's fetching it through the /API route. And if we go offline now, you see here that time became null. And the reason for that is we didn't save the actual API route in the service worker. So this API route will fail every time we try to fetch it. Why am I telling you this? Well, it's because it allows you to control like which data is okay to have, to be stale. So it's okay if a user maybe goes to the about page and the data is not the most latest version. But if you have something like a chat app where you're fetching new messages, then you can actually control that. And you can also identify that the user is offline. And like I mentioned, so if you reload this, I thought that it was gonna actually work there. But yeah, you are able to have your application actually work offline. I think the reason it didn't work was because I didn't load this like API route into the service worker. But if I go offline now, it still doesn't work. Okay, this is the magic of demos. So there is like a lot. Service worker is a little bit complicated, and I'm not going to pretend that I know all about it, but I know that you can build really cool experiences with it. The last thing I wanted to show is that service worker also enables push notifications. So you might have heard that, like, for example, now iOS allows you to send like actual push notifications to users. And this can also be done through the service worker. And I wanted to just show you how easy it is to add something like that. So I have a little cheat service worker here that I created. And let's see, I've added a method inside of it called push. So I'm going to copy this into my service worker. There we go. And the push method basically will be invoked every time you get a push, or rather, every time you send a push to your users, this function will be invoked. And the function calls a special method that actually allows the mobile phone or the browser to show that like native push notification. I just want to show you quickly here how you can interface with that through the debugger. So I'm going to, again, reload here. This is like an annoying thing with service workers that you have to wait for them to activate the new version. Here we go. And then you can use this test feature here to actually send a push message. And if you go to the console, you can see here, so maybe a little bit small, it says sending notification test push message from DevTools. So that showed that it was working correctly. So as I said, kind of like a little bit unstructured, but hopefully I gave you a little bit of an insight into service workers and like what kind of cool things you can build with it. So you can basically have your app work completely offline if you'd like to, with a little bit of work. And hopefully you also learned that the default service worker in SvelteKit is very good, and you don't actually need to complicate it with any other frameworks as well. So that's it. That's the end.
Super cool. I think service worker is actually a super cool technology in general, and this is like the usual service worker use, but also I think some people like something that I just recently realized is that like you can actually build a whole fake server with service worker. Like, for example, at Storybook, they are actually using service worker to like provide you with the ability to test your server components in React. Because obviously, like to test server component, you actually need a server. And given that Storybook just runs on the client side, like with these, you can actually have an actual server. So it's pretty interesting in my opinion.
And it's really cool what you can do, but even from the like smallest example, you can already like introduce offline into your app like very easily with just a few lines of code.
Yeah, it's also very cool. And also the reason why your root was not being cached is because the path name actually starts with API.
Yeah. Oh my God, you're so right.
Yeah,
you're right. God, yeah, that is very true. Wow. Yeah, just shows you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just like and as usual, like this is a form of caching. So as we were talking about last time with cache, make sure to like and like the service worker will actually like if you, as you can see, if you change the code of a service worker, the new service worker will actually just be registered if every instance of the old service worker has shut down. So basically, if you change the code and you leave the tab open and you have two tabs, for example, the two tabs share a service worker. And if you never close the other tab, and the user does not go inside the DevTools and unregister the service worker, will actually hang with the old service worker.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something to pay very attention when you are building a production application, because if you mess up with these, you can literally just lost a user. Like you cannot, you if you introduce a bug in a service worker, for example, and they never close their tab, they can really like have the bug forever, and you have no way to change that code. So it's something to take really into consideration. But
I just wanted to say, about data freshness, you're very right, and that's why I demoed this little your offline component, because usually it's okay to show old data if you just show it to the user, that just so you know, like, this might not be the very latest up-to-date information. And that's a very quick way to make your applications like offline friendly.
Yeah. And Captain Kurman is saying you can programmatically force the update or prompt the user to allow the update. I think there is an API for when you are registering the service worker. You can actually say something like I can't remember the API, the precise API, but yeah, I think you can actually tell. But yeah, I mean, it's just like be aware of the fact that you actually need to you can have this problem. That's the
yeah.
It was my
I think
PSA.
It's this thing called the skip waiting, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you can actually even see it. If I go back online, you can actually even there's like a button that is called skip waiting, but you can actually call this in the in the activation function.
When you register the service worker, you can say like skip waiting, and it will remove the old service worker and force the new one. And you can also prompt the user to like remove the old service worker, and which again is very cool. And yeah, I very much like this technology, and it's very powerful again because this is also the key to unlock the PWA experience, which is another thing that we should probably talk about, because if you want to have a native-like experience, a PWA really can do a lot of things. Like you can really if you're using a Chrome to install a PWA on Android, you literally have an app installed. But even if you're using Firefox or Safari, you also have a nicer UI, a standalone app. I think there are some features that are even segregated to be used inside a PWA, and it's very cool in my opinion. Like I've built a lot of app with PWAs because it's an app-like experience, but with old web technologies, and it's pretty cool.
Both on iOS and Android, you can actually get the completely Chromeless appearance so that it will actually look like a native app. On iOS, it's a little bit harder to add it to the home screen. You have to go through the share menu. It's a little bit more steps, but you can get that really nice native, almost native feeling. And I wanted to show also how well supported service workers are. So it's really something that's been available for several years now. That you can just use, except if you need to support Internet Explorer 11. Then I'm sorry.
And if you have, I pity you because you probably can't even use Svelte at this point.
Yeah, I'm not sure SvelteKit will run on Internet Explorer 11.
Okay, thank you, Stanislav. A very interesting demo, and again, I really like this technology. Let's move to a small discussion. I don't know if you have time, Stanislav, or if you have to go.
But no, we have time. We had one question about PWA. If you want to.
Actually, just so actually, can you say some real world use case for the PWA? Usable offline, it's okay, but mostly our data persisted on a database somewhere out there. Well, I mean, PWAs, the fact that you can store, you can cache information offline is just an extra thing. You obviously need, if you need to have data available globally, and not just locally on your phone, you want to sync up with your database once the user gets online, and you can actually use a service worker for that because they are they even have a background task. So with PWA, you can leave a task in the background that will run whenever the user come back online. So you can actually use that to sync your local data with your online data. And in general, basically, whatever you can do, if you have an application, an app that you want to write, and you don't really need to access to native hardware, because I mean, it's not even true, because there is this wonderful website which is called What PWA Can Do Today, which really showcase the thing that PWA can do today. It's a bit of an oxymoron, but I will show you. So this is everything a PWA can do today. So it can use media capture to access your camera. It can use geolocation, notification, view transition to transition between things. It can access the file system. So you could, in theory, create an app that can access the file system and literally save to your file without downloading a file. It can do authentication with your thumb. It can protocol handling. This means that basically you can register a protocol that will make sure that specific link open in your PWA, so that if you have something like, I don't know, my app : / something, when the user click on that, it will prompt to open with your PWA. File handling API again, contact picker to pick a contact from the contact list, web share, so that you can actually have the automatic, okay, I want to share this on Twitter, for example. Barcode detection, face detection. You can access the vibration of the thing. You can access audio recording. You can really do a bunch of stuff. AR, VR, orientation, 3D motion, payment with the NFC, speech recognition. It seems like it's like the gap between apps and PWAs is really closing on at least on the capabilities. The real problem with the PWAs is that like you don't have access to the store. You can actually publish to the official stores, but it's a bit cumbersome. And I think that's the real win of the app today. So if you are building an app, you are probably building an app because you want to be on the store, because it's obvious it's an obvious like marketing stuff, and also because sometimes you actually need a deeper access to the technologies on your phone. For example, if you want to have a better experience with the camera, you might need to go native, because native, obviously, your app communicate with your camera directly, while a PWA does that through the browser. So it's actually a level deep to the thing. But yeah, PWA can really do a bunch of stuff today, but they have this slight problem that like they're difficult to install. It's a bit different. Not every people like it's aware of them, but I have the feel that like right in my heart, in the future we will go through towards PWAs.
I really hope so.
Yep. Okay. So let's move to the discussion. And the discussion that we have for today is something that I also recently like start to tinker about, and is like the question, the discussion that sparked all of this is when to abstract a component. So when you want to create a component instead of just throwing everything at your plus page.svelte. And the reason why I started to think about this is because, for example, I noticed that one thing that I do is if I'm writing a form, for example, I want that form to be in my plus page.svelte. Because if I am communicating with my plus page.server through an action, I actually want to be able to just go to the next file next to it and see what form, what inputs I'm sending, what like I want to be able to just click on the next file and see what I'm sending. Except for that, I think you actually want to build a component whenever you know that the same thing can be like that there can be repetition. So I don't know, an input, you probably gonna use a bunch of inputs inside your application. You probably want them to look all the same. You might need some extra logic, for example, to check I don't know, like the errors on the input and stuff like that. So when all of these things you see that you are gonna use it a lot, then it makes sense to make a component, in my opinion. So it's just like a function at the end of the day. Like I might sound heretic now, but like at the end of the day, like thinking of a component just like React do, like as a function, I think it really conveyed the meaning of something. When are you taking your code and copy pasting that to a separate function? When you know that you can reuse that component, that function in different places. I don't know. What do you think about this, Stanislav?
Yeah, like I'm one of those people who are always very late to refactor into components. I usually let the page component grow and grow and grow, and then at some point I'm like, oh my god, this is like 300 lines. It's time to do something about it. This is a criticism that we got from the React crowd and similar frameworks that have functional components, because there you just go const list item equals, and then you define like it inline. But this is kind of being fixed a little bit with snippets. That's our solution. Yeah. I can add the example here from the Svelte 5 docs of what snippets look like. So instead of having to do like everything in a loop, which is also sometimes is not really possible. Like, for example, if you want to change the type of element it is, and there are some like edge cases around that. Now you can define this hashtag snippet construct. and actually have a reusable function.
Yeah, and Terry's saying smaller components are much more readable, and I kind of agree. But there is an extra overhead that you have to be aware of. Like smaller components means that the single component is more readable because you have less code to read to understand that component. But if you then use multiple components, multiple small components, it's much more difficult to read because the moment you use 10 components and to understand what your component that is using 10 components is doing, you have to jump into 10 different places inside your component, or even worse, in 10 different files. In my opinion, that is really worse than just writing all of them inside a single file. So also because like you have to think about the fact that if you're building a component for a small thing, this means that you are probably like building just an input, for example. So putting an input inside a component means that from outside you don't know that that's just an input. While if you are just using inputs inside your code, you know that that's just an input. So it adds a bit of overhead to that. So it needs to be like, I think there needs to be a balance for that. So you don't want to create a component for every single line, otherwise it's just a mess and you have to jump around the 200 files. But at the same time, if you really think that you want to like that, you will have to add a bit of logic every time, that's where you want to create a component. And I also think that, yes, snippet is the right middle ground because it allows you to not repeat code if you see that it's just a template, for example. And at the same time, like it allows you to not have to move outside of the file.
I can say that as somebody who is okay with working with slightly bigger files, I've also seen projects where everything is super abstracted and you're like 10 components deep to find anything at all. One thing that's really helped me is code folding has really helped me with this. So like just being able to, for example, fold the different functions, or you can, as you see, it even works to fold like specific tags. So actually, like what I find now that I'm having problems with usually is the style, because you can't really like fold like the styles if you have a lot of stuff. Then finally you just have a bunch of rules, and then it starts to get completely unwieldy. And then I'm like, okay, now it's time to extract it into a component. But why you can get quite far by just kind of like expanding and closing stuff off that you don't really need in a component.
Yeah, I agree. Let me see. There is, for us, the decision point was when a page should look like different on some user data. There was no way to handle inside the plus page Svelte or in the same component, even it has shared part. Yeah, I mean, if it has shared part, but then the rest is completely different, you should just componentize those shared parts and move that to a different start.
Yeah, typical example, if you need to load different like widgets and stuff, you need Svelte component, and then you just kind of have to break it up. So there's no way around it.
Yep. And I think that summarized pretty quickly like what I feel about components. Like the one rule that I'm trying to follow for myself is that if I'm working with a form, I want that form inside my plus page does Svelte. Because I really like. There's also the extra stuff like when you are working with a form, we are actually going between a client and a server. So this means that you actually need, for example, the name on the input to match the form data.get that you are on the action. So you really want those two to be as close as possible. And I even got around, like, for example, something that I'm trying to do more often is export. Like I basically use the name for each field. I export them from an object inside the plus page.svelte component so that I can use the object inside the component and import the object on the server side. So like it's a bit more type safe to do it this way.
Cool. We got another pro tip here. If you use the nested CSS, I guess, which is
cool.
coming like officially, right, to
I
browsers.
think
don't
it's
know
actually now it's officially supported by every browser.
Really?
Obviously, yeah, it should be. It should be. Which is super cool. I'm always on the line. Like I never know when to start using something, because even if I'm one of the guy that like does not update that often. Maybe it's just a meeting, but I'm always scared of, okay, I start using nesting, and what if my one of my user does not update their browser and still has Chrome 109? I mean, it's probably not that.
Yeah. Well, this
Not
looks
that
better
huge.
than I thought. Actually, I thought this was
Yeah,
a super new feature, but it is actually very well supported already,
yeah,
even
it's
in Safari on iOS and stuff. So that's
yeah.
cool
I
to see.
think Samsung Internet has it behind a flag, maybe. But yeah, it's actually decently supported.
That's cool. But wasn't there an issue with using it with Svelte kit, right? Because of some pre-processing stuff, or is that fixed now?
I think with Svelte 5 there was a problem with. I think in Svelte 4 there was a problem because nested elements was not given the Svelte class, so that was a problem. With Svelte 5 in the beginning, if you don't know, maybe in Svelte 5 we are ditching the old parser, and basically Rich built a new parser for Svelte CSS, because the old parser was actually parsing everything. Like it made sure that the selector was correct and stuff like that. But in Svelte we actually don't care if the selector is correct or not. We just need to know if it's a selector, or if it's an ID selector, because we want to remove part of that. So uh, Rich actually built a much simpler and smaller parser for CSS. And in the beginning of Svelte 5, I think that did not support nesting, but now I think it's actually like it was fixed quite a while ago.
We have a really spicy question, Paolo. Maybe the last question for today. What's your take on the server components?
Ooh, Svelte server component. I think that I mean, there's actually a public discussion somewhere where Rich actually started to tinker about not server components, because it's a bit different, but the ability to load data from a component. I think it's actually pretty like I like that concept of React server component, the fact to be able to tie data to its own component, like each component, it's able to load its own data. It's a pretty powerful thing. I think exactly that's what I was coming up like poor for performance, because it's very very easy to introduce waterfalls with that. And that's why, for example, Next had to basically everything inside React server component needs to be cached properly, because otherwise it will be just a mess. I think it should be used sparsely. Like there are some components where it's really useful to be able to load data asynchronously, and you should probably use them there. But I think the paradigm of loading data for the root is probably good enough. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
wrong. We
I,
can see.
I think server components it's been a little bit divisive. Like it is extremely cool what they've done, and it's a very powerful technology. It does add a lot to the bundle size, which is something many people don't think. That parser and
Yeah,
processor is very complex, and also yeah, it's the format is not very like standardized. So like we like standard web standards in SvelteKit, request, response, fetch.
yeah,
But this RSC format is basically like a completely new
yeah.
thing. And maybe it will be a standard in 5 years or 10 years, but it's not right now. And so I think we will maybe get something like this further up, like something similar, conceptually similar, but I don't know if it's going to be specifically like server components as they
Yeah,
are
no, exactly.
right
Also,
now.
because I think actually, like RSC, I think it was specifically made for React. So it's actually like the whole standard, which is not actually a standard, was specifically made to serialize a React component to RSC. So I think we would probably get something for loading asynchronously inside a component in the future, but it will probably be different from React Server Component quite a while. One instance where I actually needed something like this was like we had basically an icon component where we would just load a separate Svelte component, like an SVG, and we basically wanted to have that SVG to be loaded and only that SVG to be loaded, like not the whole array of SVGs, because it could be a lot of code. So we wanted to basically use a dynamic import. To use a dynamic import, obviously you need to await. So we actually used the await block in Svelte, but the problem is that that's not progressive enhanceable. So basically inside like before JavaScript loads, there will be nothing inside there. The solution that I used was actually like I've imported all the SVGs as URL with Vite, and then so basically like the loading of the await was just an IMG source with the URL. So you get basically an IMG, and then it will replace by the actually inline SVG, which is more powerful because we could add some accessibility stuff like the title and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's cool. There's definitely some rough edges with the page loading stuff, especially when you're dealing with the asynchronous
that's exactly like the kind of component that really needs to load, for example, a component, a component that needs to load some async data, which is very specific to that component, that you want to be able to use that component everywhere in your application. But that's just the only thing that I can think of.
And maybe that's a future demo, because there are some really cool solutions to that as well.
Yeah. Okay, I think we are done. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed this, the fantastic demo from Stanislav. And I hope to see you tomorrow on this very YouTube channel, because I cannot wait for tomorrow's Svelte Summit. And again, I reiterate, please join svelte.dev/chat, because tomorrow there will be a lot of talking about each talk. A talk about a talk. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye. Let me